Hello everybody, it's AJ back again with the Mighty Glue Stick channel and another Monster Ecology video. Okay, so today I'm going to be continuing on with the lycanthropes that we've been covering lately. I'm going to be covering the wereboar. Now, the wereboars hasn't had a lot of love, really, as far as D&D ecologies go, but they're an interesting critter, and one which adventurers probably will run into eventually. Starting with the stats, they're a medium humanoid, shape changer, neutral evil by alignment, armor class of 10 in humanoid form, 11 in natural armor in boar or hybrid form, hit points of 78, so not to be sniffed at, speed of 30 feet and 40 feet in boar form, so they can run pretty quick as a pig. And if you've ever encountered pigs in the wild, which I have, they're pretty fast and can move pretty quickly and can be on you in seconds. So they've got a strength of 17, dexterity of 10, constitution of 15, intelligence of 10, wisdom of 11, and charisma of 8. They've got a +2 on perception. They don't have a particularly good sense of smell, although I would argue that boars actually do. They have immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons that aren't silvered. And it should be noted here that they are also vulnerable to fire. They have a passive perception of 12. They speak common, but can't speak in boar form. They're listed as challenge rating of 4, but they're much more dangerous than that because they usually gather in groups or gangs or mobs, but more on that in a second. So they are shape changers. They can use an action to polymorph at will into a bear humanoid hybrid form, or boar humanoid hybrid form, or that of a boar, or back into its true form, which is that of humanoid. In statistics, other than its AC, they're basically the same in humanoid form. So their special abilities is the ability to charge as a boar. So if it moves at least 15 feet straight toward a target, it's basically picked up enough speed to use its charging attack. It hits with its tusks on the same turn, and the target takes an extra 2d6 or 7 points of slashing damage. And if it's a creature, no matter its size, it must succeed on a DC 13 strength saving throw or be knocked prone. So it can knock down pretty much anything on a lucky roll. They're relentless, which means that once per day or after a short or long rest, but effectively once per encounter, if the wereboar takes 14 points of damage or less, that would reduce it to 0 hit points. It is reduced to 1 hit point instead. So essentially, that's kind of like a massive damage thing. If you do enough damage to the wereboar to kill it, and you've done over 14 points of damage, then you've lopped its head off or something like that, or skewered it and it's died. But otherwise, it can carry on with really grievous wounds. Now, this is a stat reflection of their nature, which is berserk. They are berserkers. So in combat, they relish goring and slashing and destroying their foe, and they are single-minded in their ferocity. They are ferocious, even more so than werewolf, which are just savage, but wereboar really is trying to destroy you. They have multi-attack in humanoid or hybrid form only, where they can make 2 attacks, one of which is with its tusks, and its tusks do they're +5 to hit and do 10 points of slashing damage, and if the target is a humanoid, it must succeed on a DC 12 Constitution saving throw or be cursed with wereboar lycanthropy. Now, you may notice that the different were creatures have different save DCs for the curse of lycanthropy, which is interesting, isn't it? So essentially, rats are the weakest form of the disease with a DC 11, followed by boars. And then you go to wolves and werebears and were-tigers, and then werebears. Werebears being the strongest form of the disease, which I think is one reason why they're reluctant to spread it. Wereboars, on the other hand, love spreading the disease because typically, if they're attacking some settlement or some such thing, they don't care. They don't care if you get the disease, and the more you fight it, the more they'll sort of get a grim satisfaction that the fact that somebody else is struggling with this disease as well. They can also attack with a weapon. Typically, they'll have fairly primitive, easy-to-make weapons like great clubs or mauls, and they're listed as with a maul here, which does +5 to hit and does 10 points of bludgeoning damage, which, of course, they can only use in hybrid or human form. In the human form, they are stocky, they're hairy, they're not particularly attractive. An attractive wereboar is a rarity indeed. The males will have jagged and crooked teeth, females somewhat less so. In wereboar form, typically the males have very pronounced and large tusks, but females can gore as well. And they're very hairy, and they are grumpy pretty much all the time. But they've got an interesting sort of dichotomy in the lore and the history of wereboars, as I was reading through. And the Pathfinder wereboars are actually pretty interesting. So they've got an interesting relationship with orcs, and particularly in Pathfinder. But if you really dig into the lore and go for more sort of obscure stuff that's not exactly canon, but is floating around the edges, particularly very early on, in the D&D expert set when they introduced the devil swine. So devil swine were not lycanthropes, but they were fat humans who could polymorph into pigs at will, and they had a charming gaze attack. And it's rumoured that Orcus, in his mortal form, was a devil swine. Now, that's, of course, it doesn't mesh with modern day lore whatsoever, but it's pretty interesting. Of course, Orcus is a demon, and he's a demon lord of undeath, so that's, whatever. But it is argued that wereboars do have a long history with orcs, and they are either orcs or they hate orcs. There's no in between with wereboars. So orcs, of course, would see the curse of lycanthropy as somewhat of a boon, because it makes them more savage and predatory. And anything that gives you strength and control in their society is good, because it elevates you, because you can beat anybody who disagrees with you. Wereboars, of course, are berserkers, and they're very strong, and they're very grumpy, and that pretty much fits with orc society. They also do have the ability to cohabitate with others, unlike werewolves, which have a bit of a problem with it, and werebears just generally avoid orcs in total. Were-rats are too conniving and cunning and end up basically taking over and controlling everything. But wereboars are a nice sort of middle ground. Were-tigers, of course, are too fastidious to even touch an orc. They're disgusting. So they do have a long history with them. And in Pathfinder, there's the orc shamans of Cecilrain, the god of fire. Direboars are the holy symbol of that god. And yeah, so they actually seek out the curse of lycanthropy for their followers. But that's Pathfinder. We're not really covering that. It's interesting to note, though, if you wanted to introduce some sort of god of fire into your orc clan, then and give them a direboar animal, why not? So stress makes the wereboars, who are constantly grumpy anyway, lose it. They go berserk, and much like the Hulk, they rage out and they transform almost unwillingly into a hybrid wereboar form, and they go berserk, and they gore everybody. So they tend to avoid settlements and towns and cities in particular, because they lose it all the time. Things just push them over their edge, and they don't have self-control, and they run amok. So much like, the good old Hulk, he rages against his evil nature and he goes out in the wilderness or just travels constantly. What the wereboars do, because they do actually so crave social contact as humans, they form their own societies, and they form up as gangs, essentially. So if you model them after a wilderness mob, or a mercenary troop, or more particularly a biker gang, that's pretty much exactly what they're like. They are pretty much a D&D biker gang. They are, the war pigs of the power. And they do have little clutches of closely knit female social circles who basically stand up for themselves against the stronger males. They've got a society where they're quick to anger but quick to forgive. And although they are neutral evil, they do tend to do uncharacteristically good things, which are coincidentally characteristic of them. So if they find a lost child out in the wilderness, they're more than likely to guide that child back to relative safety. And one aspect of them which is often overlooked is that as they live out in the frontier in the wilderness, on the edges of society, at the edges of rural areas, they tend to encounter trolls and ogres and orcs and giants, and they don't get on with them. So having a group of wereboars in the area may actually be slightly beneficial to a settlement or a frontier, because they may fight trolls and ogres and orcs and keep the numbers down somewhat, because wereboars are nothing to be sniffed at in combat. They are ferocious, and trolls, ogres, orcs and giants may tend to avoid large numbers of them. Of course, they can get out of control, and a group of wereboars are just as likely to completely raid and devastate a community under the slightest of offensive reasons as a group of orcs or ogres want to do. And of course, giants are constantly hungry and will attack pretty much anything in the throes of hunger. So yeah, they're going to be problematic, but sometimes there can be a status quo. So yeah, they operate as gangs. They have a stormy relationship with orcs, to say the least, or they are part of orc society and are ferocious warriors, to say the least. They may possibly worship dark gods. They may possibly be contrite and very sad humanoids who got turned into werewolves against their will and have been ostracized by society in general. Or they may have been born into the life by their parents being lycanthropes themselves, so there is no hope for them short of, say, a wish spell of curing this disease that they were born into. And wereboar society may be their life. And they may be quite proud of it and wear gang colours, who knows. I'll leave it up to you. But yeah, wereboars, they are interesting. Certainly, they're not a throwaway encounter beastie. They can actually be a society in and to and of themselves out in the frontier that you may run across at any time, particularly if you're going into places where others don't venture, where, you know, rumours of horrors and monsters and things may attract the wereboar to live in that area, because other humanoids don't go there very much, to annoy them and make them rage out and lose their shit. So, next up, were tigers. Thanks for listening, everybody.